Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Monday, December 8th, 2025. There's no 911 for us. Inside America's elite urban search and rescue teams. On a blustery morning in Dayton, Ohio, 8 firefighters from around the country stand in front of a 20-foot concrete cylinder with the words Bell Tower spray painted on the front of a 20-foot concrete cylinder. They're here for search and rescue training course. Instructor Grant Light holds up a blowtorch. You're going inside. Make a cut, he explains, gesturing the concrete cylinder. Confined space cutting. A 6'6" trainee from Virginia steps forward. So I'm going into the hole? He asks, incredulously pointing to a narrow-looking slot on the side of the tower. Oh yeah, Light says cheerfully. A search and rescue expert climbs out of the concrete tower as part of a search and rescue training offered by Ohio Task Force 1. The trainee looks dubiously at the opening and then stoops over, wiggling, grunting, and cursing under his breath as he squeezes into the darkness with a torch. The goal of the exercise and all the scenarios in this training is to simulate the actual experience of rescuing people, whether it's from collapsed building or a pile of debris after a flood, hurricane, or wildfire. The members of the country's urban search and rescue teams save lives and recover human remains after the biggest calamities. They were the ones who rescued people from rushing water during Hurricanes Helene and Milton last year. They searched through burned homes after wildfires in Lahaina, Hawaii, and Los Angeles, California. They sifted through the rubble after the catastrophic condominium collapse in Surfside, Florida in 2021. The Urban Search and Rescue Program in the United States is by far the most extensive, most highly trained, and probably most respected system in the entire world, says Ken Pegorek, the former head of the Urban Search and Rescue Branch at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, which funds and oversees the national network of task forces. But changes to FEMA proposed by the Trump administration are putting pressure on the country's search and rescue system. The Trump administration has proposed eliminating FEMA as it currently exists, leaving the future of the agency's search and rescue system. The Trump administration has proposed eliminating FEMA, and rescue teams unclear. Things are very in flux right now, says Pagorek. Thanks to chronic underfunding, the teams already operate on a shoestring budget. The search and rescue system as a whole receives about $40 million from Congress each year. which has not kept up with the cost of inflation. Pagurek says he estimates the true cost to train and equip the teams is nearly twice as high. Meanwhile, the climate change drives more extreme weather across the country. The teams are as busy as they've ever been. In 2024, search and rescue teams are responded to a total of 9 major disasters. According to FEMA, that is tied for the highest annual number going back to 1999. Records maintained by the National Urban Search and Rescue Response System shown. I don't think there's a tax-funded program in the United States that provides more return on investment for the public, Pagurek says. We're going to do whatever we can to save that life. A sprawling system. There are 28 FEMA urban search and rescue teams, also known as task forces, each with about 200 members, including paramedics, doctors, and engineers. Most task force members come from a firefighting background, and the vast majority are men, which reflects the gender norms in firefighting more broadly. It generally takes years for task force applicants to be accepted, according to Pennsylvania Task Force 1 team leader Ivan Lopez. They are supposed to be elite. They're supposed to be the tip of the spear, says Mike Moole, who has served on Ohio Task Force 1 since its founding in 1998, and responded to the World Trade Center site in Manhattan after the September 11, 2001 attacks. We have a little saying, it's up to us, because we don't have anyone else to call. There's no 911 for us. We can't call another agency for help. In some ways, serving on a team is kind of like being in the National Guard. Most days, you just do your job for a local fire department or other employer. Every month or so, depending on your role within the team, you do training exercises to enroll within the team for skills such as handling search and rescue dogs or piloting boats in floodwaters. Each year, there are more than a dozen trainings offered by task forces all over the country. Then, when there's a major disaster, the federal government can deploy teams from anywhere in the country. When the call comes to deploy, team members must be on the road within about 6 hours. All 28 task forces do the same training and have the same equipment, so they're interchangeable and can work seamlessly with each other, no matter where they're deployed. A swift water rescue specialist from Texas can use a boat and life-saving equipment that belongs to a team from Nebraska. Training to be calm. In October, about 40 people gathered in Dayton, Ohio, at headquarters of Ohio Task Force 1 for a heavy equipment training. Over 4 days, they practiced cutting and moving giant slabs of concrete. Vehicles and other debris using torches, cranes, and excavators. One of the main exercises they did was torch practice inside the bell tower cylinder. Training mirrors real-world situations: terrorism attacks, earthquakes, hurricanes, and flash floods often trap people inside huge piles of debris, from collapsed buildings to mangled cars that were swept away. By floodwaters. We have to train ourselves to be calm, says instructor Ryan Hoxton, a 20-year veteran of the Ohio Task Force, who has deployed to dozens of disasters, including the deadly flash floods that hit his home state of Kentucky earlier this year. We gotta think clearly. They pay us to be calm. That's our job. A calm demeanor is crucial because rescuers often work for hours on end. Frantic searching is ultimately less effective, Hoxton says. One of the key skills they practice is math. Finding people in debris pile requires a lot of arithmetic, geometry, and even light calculus, all done under enormous pressure and often with very little sleep. Imagine that there is a person trapped under a large slab of concrete. In order to rescue that person, a crane must lift the slab, but different cranes and excavator machines are designed to lift different amounts of weights, depending on how the equipment is set up and how far away the load is. Picking up something that's too heavy or too far away could cause a dangerous situation if the crane tips or breaks. The search and rescue personnel must calculate the weight of the slab and measure how far it is from the crane. Then they must calculate the center of gravity of the slab so they can attach it to the crane in a way where it won't fall or spin wildly as it's lifted. Over the course of an hour, a search and rescue team can collectively do hundreds of high-stakes calculations. We give one persona because we like the rough and tumble rock breaker image. Moule says, but they're actually doing math and algebra out there. There's a true scientific component to what they're doing. Mike Moule has worked in the Ohio Task Force 1 since it was founded in 1998. He helped respond to the World Trade Center site after the September 11, 2001 attacks. Federal dollars, local talent. Training like the one in Ohio are paid with federal dollars because FEMA sets the training standards for all 28 urban search and rescue teams across the country. That cooperative approach is what makes it possible for the U.S. to have a search and rescue team system that covers the whole country, even rural areas. And that could never maintain such a force on their own. And team members bring their own training and experience back to their jobs as local firefighters as well. says John Morrison, a firefighter in Fairfax County, Virginia, who has served on Virginia Task Force 1 since 2003. It's a pretty cool win-win situation, says Morrison. The same people responding to these disasters are the same people responding on your local fire engine back home. But the entire system is fragile, Pajurek warns. The system is underfunded. He explains this is an onset issue for at least 15 years, maybe 20. Funding from Congress has stayed relatively flat. Even as costs have risen, leading teams struggle to pay for basic things like vehicle maintenance and rent for the warehouses to store their equipment. For example, one of the trucks in Pennsylvania Task Force 1 uses to transport rescue material needs a new motor. But it's unclear where that money would come from. There are too many pressing needs. Says Lopez, the dollar is not going far enough, he explains. An uncertain future for FEMA. The Trump administration is moving to overhaul FEMA, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. The President and DHS Secretary, Kristi Noem, have repeatedly said that FEMA should be eliminated as it currently exists. A presidentially appointed Council of Emergency Management experts is expected to make recommendations about the future of FEMA in coming weeks. It's unclear what those impending changes will mean for FEMA's urban search and rescue system, but the agency has struggled to deploy its researchers since President Trump took office. Secretary Noem instituted a new policy that all spending above $100,000 must be personally approved by her, as NPR reported. The policy has created a severe bottleneck. It led to tens of thousands of unanswered calls to the agency from flood survivors in Texas after the deadly July 4 floods there. In the lengthy rebuttal posted on its website, DHS strenuously denied allegations that Noem did not authorize spending to deploy FEMA's urban search and rescue teams to the area until 72 hours after the floods occurred. In response to questions about the Texas response, FEMA said in a statement to NPR, emergency response is locally executed, state-managed, and federally supported. As the state identified a need for additional search and rescue teams, FEMA quickly responded to the requests. The agency did not respond to specific questions about when out-of-state teams were deployed, confirming only that FEMA activated the teams after Texas authorities requested help. Shortly after the floods, Pajurek resigned from his position at FEMA, where he had led the agent's urban search and rescue branch for a year. He cited concerns that the administration's policies are hurting the agency's ability to respond to disasters. The reasons for his departure were first reported by CNN. In his resignation letter, Pajuric called his time at FEMA the distinct honor and privilege of my life, and wrote this decision was not made lightly. FEMA has maintained both funding and staffing for the search and rescue system since President Trump took office, according to a statement from the agency. Pajuric says he thinks everyone in the U.S. should understand the role that search and rescue teams play after the disaster. This is a resource available to anyone in the country, he explains. I think it's incumbent on our political leaders to support that financially. The state of childhood vaccination in the U.S. With childhood vaccination rates already declining, a vaccine advisory committee to the CDC considers changing the vaccine schedule, including dropping the universal hepatitis B vaccine for newborns. Jonna Summers, the host. Childhood vaccines are once again under debate in the United States. Over the next 2 days, an advisory committee to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will consider changing the vaccine recommendations for children. That includes delaying the hepatitis B vaccine, which is given at birth. Committee members were picked by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has long questioned the safety of vaccines. And this is happening as childhood vaccination rates are declining and preventable diseases like measles are on the rise. NPR Maria Godoy is here now. Hi. Maria Godoy Blind says hi. Maria, just start by telling us, what do vaccination rates look like in the U.S.? Well, we're definitely backsliding. On one hand, most kids are still getting vaccinated, but those rates have been falling for years. For example, CDC data shows nationwide vaccination rates against measles have fallen to just under 92%, which is below the 95% threshold needed to protect against community outbreaks. In some states, it's much lower. For instance, in Idaho, it's under 80%. And even states with higher statewide vaccination rates have pockets of low vaccination that put them at risk of an outbreak. I spoke with pediatrician Peter Hotez. He's a vaccine researcher with Baylor College of Medicine. Peter Hotez. I believe we passed an inflection point. We've already now started a pretty steep decline in vaccination acceptance in the United States. Godoy. He says, when you drill down to the county level, 77% of U.S. counties have seen a decline in vaccination rates since 2019. He called that a red flag. Well, what does this mean for childhood diseases like measles, for example? Well, we're already seeing the impact. The US had a huge measles outbreak in Texas earlier this year that spread to other states. Hotez and other infectious disease experts think that the US is likely to lose its measles elimination status within the next couple of years. That means measles has been continuously transmitted within a region for a 12-month period. Maria, it seems to me that we focus an awful lot on measles. Why is that? Godoy says, it's really the canary in the coal mine of infectious diseases because it's so very contagious. It's usually the first vaccine preventable disease that comes back. So it shows us where we have gaps in our public health system. And measles is a serious disease. Before vaccination became widespread, in the 1960s, some 400 to 500 people died each year in this country from measles. And while most kids will recover, some have serious lasting consequences, including deafness and blindness. And we are also seeing other vaccine preventable diseases return. Pertussis, so whooping cough, is making a comeback. This year, 3 infants died of the disease in Kentucky. None of them were vaccinated. And 2 others died in Louisiana. And there are concerns that other diseases that we don't worry about today, like rubella or even polio, could potentially return. Here's Hotez again. So we're already now, maybe lost the battle on measles and pertussis, and others will likely follow. At least in places where vaccination rates have plummeted. What are you hearing from pediatricians? So the doctors I spoke to are worried that the messaging from this administration is making things worse. Just recently, the CDC, under the director of Secretary Kennedy, changed its website to say, quote, "The claim that vaccines do not cause autism is not evidence-based." When in fact, there's a large body of research debunking such link. Dr. Sean O'Leary, with an American Academy of Pediatrics, said, changes like this are scaring parents, and he worried that more of them will refuse vaccines for their kids, who will then suffer from diseases when they don't need to. Summer says, NPR's Maria Godoy. Thanks. Thank you.